Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly ag weather update brought to you by Farm Credit. I want to start you off with kind of the uniqueness of this pattern we've been in since most of May, but almost the entirety of June here. It's shown to you in this map, and you're looking at the height pattern. So when I say height, I'm talking about troughs and ridges. So we can always follow the jet stream around the ridges to the north and the troughs to the south. So the flow has done something like this. And what's been interesting is that we've seen large ridges of high pressure build across parts of central and eastern Canada, including occasionally back in May, big ridges that built over western Canada. But then this piece right here is the most intriguing of all of it. That is where our displaced Bermuda high has been residing. In other words, this height anomaly is normally sitting right into this area. And as a result, we've seen colder weather in the southwest. We've seen colder weather in the southeast. We've seen extremely dry conditions that have set up here throughout parts of the Midwest, despite some of the storm systems that have gone through. We've seen wildfires in Eastern Canada and Western Canada. And most of the time, this pattern has dipped colder weather over much of the southeast. And this past weekend and last week, almost the entirety of last week, some extremely wet weather. It has also allowed for the kind of early sparking of a couple of named systems, Brett and Cindy. Now, Brett has since gone, but Cindy is still moving up toward Bermuda. I'm going to show you that in a few minutes. We're going to talk more about that tropical season in just a few moments. What's interesting about this is this pattern has changed, and what is really built in lately is a larger ridge into this area. And that's kind of just shoved the pattern around enough to get rid of the bigger ridges that have been over Canada, although the fires are still there. But the smoke from those fires is no longer being pulled into the southeast. In fact, as we work our way through the beginning of this week, some of the smoke from these wildfires is going all the way over to Europe. So that's a bit different than what we saw in early June, where that smoke was being brought straight down through the Appalachian Mountains along the East Coast, really degrading our air quality. Now, this is the ridge we're going to keep an eye on all week. Can you actually see it here in the smoke field? This is a ridge that by the end of the week will likely try to open up temporarily into the southeast, returning some heat. But it's going to be, I think, relatively short-lived. And if you just look at where we've been, this is what the month of June has looked like so far. Parts of North Carolina, Virginia, the Appalachian Mountains down to Georgia, we're talking about a top 5 to a top 10 coldest June on record so far. The heat has primarily been stretching lately from Texas to the northern plains and then up into Canada. In fact, most of the U.S. has avoided serious heat stress. Now, for you corn and soybean farmers, you know that there's big drought in this particular area right now. And there was a weekend system that rolled through there, including some massive storms on Sunday that came through the eastern Corn Belt. One of the things that's prevented major yield loss, allowing a lot of growers in the Midwest to consider that this crop has not yet had its last say, is that it's not been hot in this area either. And where it was warm in the northern plains, they needed this heat to catch up. And then this, there are a bunch of storms this past week, and I'll show you those in a few moments. But another way to look at that heat is to look at a GDD anomaly map. So this is from April 1 up until the 23rd. There's always a 2-day lag on this. And remember, I record these on Sunday night. But I just want to point out again, we are over 200 GDDs below normal in parts of North Carolina and up to about 100 GDDs below normal down here in parts of Georgia. And that's true of much of the southern tier of the United States. And it was just until this last week that really serious heat began to build into Texas over to Louisiana at times. So I want to show you what the pattern's going to do, all right? Now, I could stitch together every teleconnection there is and try to make a story out of it. The reality of it is our signals are very weak, which means we're pretty reliant right now on what the models are suggesting. And this is going to be the first part of the story. The trough that slid through the eastern Corn Belt this weekend, producing over 400 reports of severe weather, especially in parts like Michigan and Indiana, getting down to Kentucky, Tennessee, and down here to Arkansas. That system, notice this, the flow's coming around like that. On Monday evening, we're going to watch this area very, very carefully for some severe weather. So that slides through, there it is, and it's going to keep things cooler. But watch what the ridge does here. It starts to expand out of Texas over to Louisiana by the time we get into Wednesday. And by Thursday and Friday, it even opens up into parts of the southeast. So by the end of the week, the expansion of this ridge a bit farther to the east is going to bring in some heat. Now, in the Midwest, we're all going to be watching this trough of low pressure sliding through here. And we can just see this trough forming. And we're going to wait to see if this upcoming Saturday, this actually revives the chances for storms in this area. Right now, the picture's not very clear, but this would be at the heart of where there is drought. And we'll take a closer look at that in a few seconds. But then what we notice is after July the 1st, what do we see? We actually saw the ridge kind of split. Piece goes here, some of it retrogrades. So the flow comes back into something like that. And here we go again with more troughs coming through the Mississippi Basin toward the southeast. What's missing in this entire pattern is just a big area of high pressure sitting off the coast to really crank up the heat. So out here to July the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, I do not see these height lines bulging. They're all dipping. And so we want to take careful note of that, because if we're going to assess when our risk of heat and drought comes in, it's certainly not showing up here through the first 10 days of the month of July. Now, where's the heat going to go? We're going to try to build it in quickly here, but notice it comes back to the west. So that first week of July, I'm not right now seeing too much heat stress in the southeast. I'm seeing most of it in the southern plains and then backing up here into the western United States. Now, thinking about that, we got a new drought monitor. And it was interesting to note, because remember, this was made on Tuesday. We had a few places in North Carolina that actually had drought degradation. But if you look at the current map, all right, let's see if I can get this to load for us, sorry. The current map here is just going to show that overall, there it is, we are drought-free in this area. It's drier to the north. It's drier, of course, in the Midwest where the drought has gotten worse. But what we're going to assess here in this pattern is how is it possible that this is going to change as we go forward. So I want to let you know something kind of interesting here. If you look at our longer term water issues, even though this area is only in abnormally dry conditions, the longer standing hydrologic drought there means that we actually need to get about 6 to 10 inches of rain in this area to completely bring us back up to just normal, given the deficits we've seen earlier in the year and last year as well. So I wanted to point that out, and some of the deficits down here up to a foot in Florida, despite some recent heavy rain. So we are not in a drought scenario now because of recent heavy rain. But if you look at what it takes to fully pull you out of the drought in a month, that's what it would take. By the way, in parts of Nebraska, it's almost 18 inches. And where I live over in Illinois, we're about 8 inches behind normal. So this is going to be an area that's going to be continued to get discussed here. Another way to look at this is for the month of June, what are the ranks? Now, Michigan and my home state of Illinois kind of take the top spots here in terms of driest locations. But that spot right in through here where a week ago we just saw repeated severe weather, over 2,500 reports of severe weather, finishing off in a low that just curled up all week at the end of the week and finally made its way into New England. That's what's driven the major increase here. A storm system did roll through the Midwest this past week, and I'll show you those precip amounts in just a few seconds, but just notice how wet things are here. You can also look at it this way. This is the last 30 days in terms of percent of normal. And this goes up into Saturday morning. Because remember, I record this on Sunday night, so you get a brand new one of these tomorrow morning. And what you've got right in through here, though, is we got a lot of places that are above average on precip. This area right in through here might also see some strong to severe storms on Monday night, so we're going to watch out for that. But notice how there's a large, dry interior part of the country. And this is an area that a lot of folks are waiting to fill in. And certainly this is affecting the market behavior in a big way. So if we look at that last 7 days, okay, we start to now see the effect of where that frontal boundary sat first and then the low that just curled up here so slowly as it was cut off from the main flow. When you look at my color bar, notice this is the 3-inch mark and we're going up here above 6 inches. There were isolated places from Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia that did pick up 10 inches or more of rainfall. And of course, we had a lot of local flooding out of this. Now, this only went through midnight Sunday morning. We were still dealing with precipitation. We got more that's coming into this area. And another thing about this map, I lop off everything below a ½ inch. I'm just looking for the more significant rains here. So what did we have over the weekend? So this is up to Sunday night. Well, we continue to add more storms throughout the day and we see more precip here. But notice this. This part of the northern plains hammered with rainfall. A lot of places 2 to 5 inches of rain. Then rains came through Iowa, northern Illinois, southern Wisconsin, then a big severe weather outbreak that happened here and stretched on down the line here. In fact, I'm watching overnight tonight all the severe weather that's coming in this direction. And I'm concerned about that because as the sun was setting, look at the storm complex is still popping here on Sunday night. Because by the time you see this video on Monday, we're going to talk about what's left of this storm system coming toward Virginia and North Carolina here. And these storms packed a punch. Take a look at this radar animation from Sunday afternoon. The size of these storms ripping through this area and the ones that are forming, look at that, right through there. These are the storm systems, these are the storms that whose outflow is going to influence our weather. So I just want to show it to you. This is day 1, which means, or day 2, excuse me. So this is the 26th. So this is Monday. And we're seeing an enhanced risk all the way up here from New Jersey down to Raleigh and all the way over the coast. That's a big area that we're going to watch for the risk of these strong to severe storms. Now, after this, we have storm chances for the remainder of the week. But I want to show you first what the models have picked up on. So early in the morning on Monday, we're going to watch for a round of early storms to possibly pass through. See these right here? And then we're going to wait later in the day. This is now getting through midday into the evening, right there, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock in the evening. We will be watching for a line of storms to blow up right in this area. There's been quite a bit of consensus with this in the models and in the analysis, and that could rip through parts of Virginia, North Carolina, with isolated severe storms farther to the south into Georgia and the Panhandle down here in Florida. So that comes racing through sometime between 5 p.m. and midnight, clearing the coast early in the morning. That's the latest speed I've got from the high-res NAM model. So we're going to watch that carefully. And then that low slowly curls its way into New England. So this is getting out there to Tuesday afternoon. More isolated storms on Tuesday afternoon in the same spot, because once again, this is a slow-moving low, like the last one was here. So we've got this one still moving out. More storms on Tuesday coming into North Carolina and Virginia. And finally, we're going to get a bit of a break from this on Wednesday. But if you look at what the next 7 days looks like, we notice that there's still quite a lot of thunderstorm activity in throughout AgSouth's territory here. And I want to make sure I'm clear about what's expected in this area, because you start to look at this and go, wow, everybody's going to get storms. No. That's not the way this is setting up here for the Midwestern United States, which is, of course, deep in drought. So let's go have a look at what's actually going to be happening here. Now, let me take you back. I was watching this just before I recorded here. So if I show you again, here's the slow moving low that drives the storms through. There they are on Monday night. Scattered storms down the way. You saw that. So then here's round 2 coming through on Tuesday. And then that gets out of here. Now, once we get past Wednesday, which is overall a drier day, same thing for most of Thursday, you're going to start to notice as we get into the weekend, we start to see flashes of green again. These are systems that are rolling over the broader ridge, which is opened up into this area, delivering some isolated storms. We will not be able to accurately capture where they're going to be with the models. We're going to have to watch radar every day to see where these storms pop. But you see the flashes of green here? This is just the indication that the pattern stays active. And that's what we're expecting to see through our next 7 to 8 days. You got a little bit of a break in the middle of the week, Wednesday, Thursday, and then chances for storms kind of emerge for much of the following 10 days. So where do we get 10 days from now? Remember, the ridge goes west. So the flow still does something like this, which is still an active and unsettled setup. So the chances of grabbing another inch of rain, now remember, you have the system still curling in New England here, but we're looking at, in this area, a 50 to 80% chance of still another inch of rain, kind of in broad strokes here across the area. Of course, many of these storms locally will deliver much, much heavier rain, but that you all know how that works. That's just how storms work. Now notice, in these dry parts of the Midwest, the probabilities are still in the 30 to 50% range. So I want you to note that even though you saw rain coming through here, there's not a whole lot of extra rain. And if you look out there into the week 2 forecast, the European model and the CPC agree there is a known bias. I want to make sure you're clear on this. There's a very well-known bias in the GFS, which is the one that's shown over here, of being too dry in the southeast in summer. So I expect what you see here from the European model to probably pan out, meaning week 2 continues to see stormy weather. Why? Ridge comes over, trough develops. That's just an unsettled pattern in this area. Now, we're not getting much in terms of a contribution from tropical systems because Cindy is a tropical storm right now, but is expected to kind of fizzle very quickly here, as you can see. And whatever's left from Cindy is moving north like this. And that's important to know because the Bermuda High is hanging out way over here and the flow coming around it, just taking Cindy north. We still have an active area in our main development region, so we're still watching systems potentially form here. But as it stands, we don't have any threat in the near term to the Carolina coast all the way down to Georgia. Now, let's summarize this. We have heat building later this week. I'll show you that in a second. We have storms early, severe on Monday, possibly into Tuesday, but then a break Wednesday, Thursday. We see better chances for storms continuing all the way into the week 2 time period, which means I don't see flash drought being a problem here. And I say that because in a moment, I'm going to tell you why we normally worry about that this time of year. Okay, next, what are those temperatures going to do? Well, here's Monday's highs, pretty close to normal. So we go into Tuesday, cooler north, but near normal down into Georgia. Look at the heat in Texas, though. This ridge opens by Wednesday, and we start to get, this will be a beautiful day on Wednesday throughout much of the Carolinas and Georgia. And then watch, Thursday, hundreds creep into Missouri. Friday spreads farther and farther to the east. That gets us above normal here. And there's Saturday. So I told you late in the week we warm up. So does the west. So the temperature pattern briefly warms up, but then watch. As we just play this out there, this is all the way out day 5 through 10. Do you notice how we just don't seem to break away to much above average heat? That's another major part of this story. And if we stretch this out even farther, this is the latest update from the CPC, July 6th through the 21st. They have not got us going over drier. And they have got you near normal with maybe a slight warm bias, if anything, for the middle of the month of July. This same forecast is echoed by the European model for at least the southeast. We're wetter here. You can see it over the 30 days that is July, or 31 days that are July. And then if I showed you the temperatures, we get a very similar story. Notice no right now forecast of any modeling group expecting sustained really, really hot conditions. We just expect that to follow where this Texas ridge is kind of going back and forth across the southern tier of the U.S. Now, when I think about all of this, I go back to what maybe the symptoms of all of this are. We've got very, very warm water in the Atlantic. I've told you multiple times, this is already warmer than it is in the peak of hurricane season. El Nino is raging, but it's being tempered by the cooler water off the Pacific. And that is part of the Pacific meridional mode. Now, when you think about this, at some point El Nino is going to gain control in this pattern this summer, because we've seen the latest updates from the Bureau of Meteorology out of Australia, and they have got it way up here, possibly by October, being 3 degrees above average. 3 degrees above average. That would be the strongest El Nino by temperature measurement on record, if they are right here. So we start to think about that and say, well, where do we currently stand? Well, El Nino's almost up to a degree C above normal again. So it raced up here in early June, then dipped a little bit, and it's back up there again now. We might go up another 2 degrees above this. Now, why I think this is important to study is because historically, in July and August, when you correlate the warm ocean temperatures in the middle of the equatorial Pacific, that's this, okay? And by the way, that region is right here. If we correlate those historically, whoops, there we go, we tend to get, well, you see it right here, a negative correlation, which means we actually tend to, during El Nino July and Augusts, see less tropical activity, more ridging, and drier conditions. Big ridges love to sit here when there's an El Nino. That's what pumps all the moisture into this part of the country. But we don't have that this year. The Bermuda High has left. It's not expected to return. We see the ridges moving back to the west, which means we tend to get flow coming over the top of it and storms in this area. And that's why I showed you those July outlooks. And even if you go beyond that into July, August, and September, we still do not see from the major modeling centers drought developing in this area. We see it drier here, maybe drier around the Great Lakes, storms in the middle, but no indication right now from anyone that we're going to go over really hot or really dry. So we have to wait for that particular event to occur, something to shift this pattern where ridging begins to develop. I'm just telling you that right now, as I'm recording this on the 25th of June, I'm just not seeing it in the near term nor the medium term forecasts. So the last thing I want to show you today is just a little bit of an international update. Take note of a couple things. A lot of storm activity going across Europe at this point. No major drought concerns for me that I've seen across Europe's major growing areas. If there's drought problems, it may be here in the North China Plain or maybe into the Manchurian Plain, but the latest forecast just went wetter for them. Very wet north of the Yangtze River. This is called the Mayu Front that's setting up here. And then you can also see throughout much of India, getting into Southeast Asia, Indonesia, Malaysia, and over here into the Philippines, wet. Australia, very wet. This is uncharacteristic of an El Nino. But progress for harvest coming through Brazil's safrinha crop. Not only is it dry, but it's mild, so no major frost events happening here. In fact, most of the world is a bit milder than normal as we start summer here. The only places that aren't, well, this is all because of precipitation, and so is this. And other than that, we're not really seeing too much cold weather across much of the planet at this point. So I just want to give you that perspective overall and tell you to have a great rest of your week, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks.